Maybe you remember summers like this, endless, little noisy, and full of love. Pulling up to Grandma's house, the door opening for hugs, shoes kick off on the porch while she's already humming in the kitchen and the garden smells like summer. Me and my sibling would be outside, daring each other, whispering secrets and laughing when someone finally got caught. Grandma was always in the middle of it all, with flour on her hands and the same brownies in the oven, because nothing ever tasted like hers. By the end of the day, the swing was still moving, the youngest had had a bath, and the story time made everything feel quiet and safe. With that said, let's hop into this summer-inspired build. I'm building today something a little softer, a little more nostalgic, a cozy rustic home with a typical English countryside feel. I've limited myself to only cottage living, cats and dogs, garden to table kit and country kitchen kit because I really wanted that the pegs will work together and give the build that warm, lived-in look. And honestly, after the last couple of builds being a lot darker, I really wanted to make something that felt a bit more positive and comforting again. For the kitchen, I wanted it to feel really rustic and homey, like the kind of kitchen you'd remember from a childhood. I'm using lots of wood, warm tones and clutter, which is something I always enjoy doing. I actually had so much fun cluttering this space because in my last modern builds, I couldn't really go all in with it. One of my favorite parts is the self-made wood-burning oven which I made out of a fireplace. It ended up being such a nice little detail and really adds to the old-fashioned feel. The living room was probably one of my favorite parts of the whole build. I filled it with wooden furniture, patterned sofas, a big fireplace and lots of little cozy details like cross-stitching and an activity table for card games. I also added a small old TV off to the side because for this granny the television isn't the center of the room, it's more just there when needed. I wanted the room to feel more about conversation, comfort, spending time together than about screens. It reminds me a little of the kind of a place where you'd sit as a kid surrounded by family, listening to adults while you played nearby. My grandma used to have cats since I remember, so I was also placing here plenty of cats furniture around. Then downstairs I was building the hallway and the guest bedroom. I imagined this room as a space for her kids when they visit, maybe even for the grandkids too when they come to stay. I like the idea of this house being one of those places where there's always a room for a family, even if it's just for a few days at a time. And for the grandmas it's always like this, they never sell the house, they always keep it with plenty of empty rooms, which are there for the grandkids and for the kids, reserved when they will come for a visit. And also even the space was super cluttered. How I remember it, there was not much activities we could do with my sister at least. We could just have fun with each other in the garden or outside. There was no TV to watch. The peak of our day was to record our voices on the cassette in an old record player and then listening to our voices. Leave a comment, what were you doing at your grandma's house? Did you have activities to do there or did you have to use your fantasy only? And then upstairs I'm making Granny's master bedroom with her very own ensuite bathroom. This is not really how I remember my grandma's bedroom, but I remember it was huge and it was cluttered with furniture everywhere, so it seemed smaller and it was very much off the limits to our kids. I've also cluttered the space a bunch and it was still not enough, so I made this parapet above the bathtub and cluttered even more, because that's exactly how I remember it. As the last room, I made a tiny kid's room for a toddler, which I added because I wanted that the house will feel like it really belongs to a family that visits often. It's small, but it adds to the story of the home, and for your gameplay, it's easier to play with the Sims. And then the outside area. Oh, this is where it all comes together. I placed an ivy across the whole build. I created then the garden part because that was the main purpose why we were actually visiting the granny, except of her herself. She always was having chicken, which was so rare for us. I'm from a city, so to see chicken was amazing. I also created this pond under the willow tree because I wanted that this garden will feel so peaceful as it was possible. Of course, I also created a gardening corner for your granny to be able to actually garden and for your crops to be able to actually grow, so you can totally utilize this build and play in it. You don't have to use the granny. And then in front of the house, I created a curved path made from the flower bushes. I think it gave the space such a softening touch and made it a little more magical, at least in my opinion. I also used plenty of debug items from the Cottage Living. I just love the landscaping what this pack has. As a last architectural piece, I will just add the roof above our back terrace. I'm saying it now because the building of the terrace is unfortunately not on the video, as my recording was not recording anything, so you will see just a little glimpse of the back terrace. But of course, during the tour you will get the full experience, and this is the terrace. With that said, we are slowly heading towards the end of the build and towards the beginning of the tours. This was very much personal, very personal for me and very nostalgic to me. I hope you enjoyed the build. If you did, consider subscribing. And with that said, have a wonderful rest of the day, enjoy the summer, and see you next time. Bye bye!